Hi, everyone. All right, so this week we are going to take a closer look at the content in Lesson 12, Words in Context. So this week we're going to be reading selections about nature and learning how authors use language in different ways to describe what the characters see and what they feel. We're going to take a closer look at what we call literal and non literal meanings. So, a literal meaning of a word is the usual or the dictionary definition, if you will, of a word. A non literal meaning is something that is not usual, an unusual definition of a word. So before we proceed into the textbook, I would like to have you consider two sentences. So the first sentence is Paul turned out the lights and sat in the dark. The second sentence is unfortunately, when it comes to speaking French, Paul is in the dark. Notice how these two sentences use the same phrase, in the dark. So, do the words in the dark mean the same thing in both sentences? We can look around the words for context clues to help understand the meaning. So, in the first sentence, Paul turned out the lights. He was really, literally sitting in a dark room. But in the second sentence, it starts with the word unfortunately, which means it's too bad that something is the way that it is. And then he talks about speaking French. So in this sentence, Paul is not literally in a dark room. Here, in the dark means that Paul doesn't know French and therefore he can't speak it. This is what we're going to be taking a closer look at this week. Literal and non literal words, words in their context. So, in your textbook, please take a look right now at page 200, and this is also what you are seeing on the screen. And so you will see where my cursor is bouncing here as well, this red learning target. By noticing when authors are using words and phrases in special ways, you can better understand and enjoy a story. So, right here, the green word read. Words and phrases may have more than one meaning. For example, a clown is someone who works for the circus. That's its literal or usual meaning. But if you call your friend a clown, you don't literally mean that he or she is a circus clown. You just mean that your friend's behavior is silly. You're using the non literal meaning of clown. Non literal, again, means not literal or not usual. Authors use non literal language to describe story characters, settings, and events more colorfully. If you come across a word or a phrase with an unexpected meaning, use context clues, nearby words, phrases, and sentences to figure out its meaning. So let us read this passage and notice the underlined phrases. Author liked nothing better than to stay up reading long after he was supposed to be asleep. He would pull his blanket over his head like a tent, turn on his book light, and get lost in his story. Tonight, though, his dad caught him Turn off that light, Night Owl, said his dad. You've got school tomorrow. So let us now take a look at page 201. Again, green word here. This time it's think. The chart below shows how to use context clues to find the meanings of non-literal words and phrases. First, look at the literal meanings or the usual meanings. Then read the context clues from the passage. Finally, write what you think the phrases mean in the passage. So here in this organizer, you have two words and their literal meanings. So you have night owl, and that is, of course, a big-eyed bird that is usually awake at night. And then this phrase, get lost, its literal meaning is not know where you are or how to get where you want to go. And then you are going to be giving context clues. So the context clues for night owl include stays up reading, he should be asleep, and he's awake later than he is supposed to be. And then the context clue for get lost is he's lost in his story. So in these two blank boxes on the organizer, you need to give us the meaning in the passage for night owl and get lost. And we're going to be doing this together as a whole group before we proceed to the next passage in the lesson. Okay, my friends, so now we are going to move on to the passage on page 202. This is a realistic fiction passage about a character who tells about his experiences hiking on the Oregon coast. You're going to read to understand, and then you'll need to read again to find context clues to help you figure out what the non-literal meanings of specific words and phrases are in the text. So I do want you to take a look here at this purple headed square here, where it says close reader habits. Which words and phrases are unfamiliar or used in unusual ways? Underline details that help you figure out their meanings. Again, friends, close reading is very, very important to our comprehension. So again, on page 202, this passage is entitled Seaside Surprises. Starting with paragraph 1, here we go. I didn't know what to expect when my family went hiking on the Oregon coast. I'd never seen the Pacific Ocean before, but I sure knew I wanted to see a whale. After a picnic lunch, we hiked through a thick rainforest. We saw chipmunks, a lizard, and a hawk. The trail gently snaked its way up the steep mountainside to the top of a huge rocky cliff with a great view of the ocean, but I couldn't spot any whales. Then we heard something move through the woods right behind us. We turned, and there stood a huge elk with giant antlers. We all froze in place, barely breathing, until the animal slowly walked away. Then we finally relaxed. We all started laughing and jumping around in excitement. Next, the trail wound down to a sandy beach. Waves hammered the shore. We saw seagulls, crabs, clams, and even some seals happily baking themselves out on the warm rocks, but no whales. It was fun, but then it was time to go. Everyone else started walking back to our trail, but my eyes were locked on the ocean. And then it happened. Not just one whale, but a whole pod of them broke the surface of the water. I was so stunned that I could barely shout, "Look!" All right, let us take a look at page 203 up at the top where it says explore. How can you figure out the meanings of words and phrases with non literal meanings? So, I'd like you to take a look at where it says think here. Look at the phrase froze in place in paragraph 2 and complete the chart to figure out the meaning. And here's a little think bubble. When you read a word or phrase whose literal or usual meaning doesn't make sense, look for context clues that help you figure out what the author really means. So, here in this organizer, under the literal meaning for frozen place, that turned from water into ice. The context clue for that phrase frozen place is barely breathing. So, given the literal meaning and the context clue, what do you think the meaning of that passage, the meaning in the passage, what do you think froze in place means in this passage? And then we are going to proceed to the short response down here at the bottom, but it is also on page 206. It says, look at the description of the waves in paragraph 3. Describe the literal meaning of hammered. Then explain how hammered is used in the text. Tell which context clues helped you figure out the meaning. And here's a little hint. Use what you know about actual hammers to picture how the waves must have looked, sounded, and felt. And again, in these short responses, friends, please make sure you are using complete sentences and using details from the passage in your response. So again, friends, we are working on pages 203 and this short response here on page 206 in your groups.